Hey, welcome to Rich 56. Hey, we got 3 people here. Nice to have you here. 2 people on YouTube and 1 on Facebook. Okay. Okay. So, some of the topics for tonight. Let's bring that up where I can see it. It's too small. Got to make that much bigger. Some of the topics for tonight. Pulse co-owner won't release property. Pulse founders can't do so without his approval. Obviously, unfortunately, the Allen, Texas shooting, another mass shooting. This one supposedly the second most deadly so far this year. About Cody's Wish, the horse, which was not in the Kentucky Derby, the main race, but was in one of the other races leading up to that. The latest laws in Florida, which I know that Jim the Geek did send me something before the show. So we'll wait for Jim to get here for that one. Trump court testimony in the case that is presently before the New York court. And Nick Rich says Democrats need to vote in lockstep because the Republicans vote in goose step. And I read that in a comment. Yes. Do. Okay. The other thing is Biden versus debt ceiling. Good evening, ADM FLA GURL 38. Hello. We have just a few people here so far. So we will hold off. But we will go find these topics. So Pulse. Pulse nightclub. So this is a West 2 News article about the Pulse nightclub and what's going on with that. I suspect we will see Mr. Webb eventually. The lack of me tweeting out and other things has probably caused him to be late, but he'll show up here sooner or later. He doesn't always get Discord messages right away, so that might be one of the things that's slowing him up. But the article, oh, there he is. Good. Old Uncle Art. You'll have to explain who Old Uncle Art is. So for those of you that don't live around the Orlando area and maybe didn't see this news yet, the latest news Nope, you just popped into chat, West Webb. A memorial for the victims of the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting will not be built at the site of the attack. After months of negotiations, the One Pulse Foundation says the nightclub owners will not agree to donate the property. Orlando City Commissioner Patty Sheehan says it was like an arrow through her heart when she found out the Pulse Memorial, which has been in the works for 7 years, will not be built where the tragedy happens. She said, "How low do you have to sink? People died here. Their children and their friends died here. They have every right to be honored the appropriate way." The owner of the nightclub, Barbara Poma, was the founder and executive director of the One Pulse Foundation before parting ways with the organization last month. So that was the first bit of news that we got, is that she was leaving the organization, and then the speculation began why. City of Orlando offered the Pomas $2.3 million for the nightclub site in 2016, and they declined the offer because they wanted to be in charge of making the memorial. The city would have managed it otherwise. In other words, if they'd simply sold it. Sheehan continued, "To hear today, 7 years later, that they bled this foundation dry and they're not going to do the right thing doesn't just break my heart, it makes me angry." Reactions from the local leaders have poured in, with Orange County Mayor Jerry Deming saying in a statement, "I trust in the wisdom of the One Pulse Foundation to do what is best for the organization. I know the foundation will continue to work to uplift the community and support those directly affected by the tragedy." In a statement, Pulse nightclub shooting survivor Brandon Wolf said, "Disappointing is an understatement. This situation is unacceptable and a slap in the face to a community that has been through an immense amount of grief and pain over the last 7 years. The only appropriate use for it is a respectful memorial site that is open to the public free of charge." Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer reacted to the announcement, saying in part, "We will continue to support the dedicated work of the foundation to honor and preserve the legacy of those taken in their efforts to create a sanctuary of hope here in our community." State Representative Anna Askamani said, "I'm incredibly disappointed by this news. The only appropriate decision of land lease for this location is a memorial for those who we tragically lost at Pulse. I urge those involved in these discussions to right this wrong." Foundation said it would provide an update in mid-May regarding its plans to move forward with the new site. Now, this article ends at that point, and we will get into this other topic below. But essentially what happened is the Pomas founded the nightclub, and there is another individual that the Pomas needed to seek capital from in order to do that. So that individual does not want to simply sign away the rights to the property. Not sure what that individual wants. I'm not sure what he wants. I don't know if he wants money or notoriety or what, but he's not signing off. So that's preventing them doing what they want to do. Let's see. Pulse nightclub. Let's see if we can. Won't allow One Pulse to build memorial. Okay, that was 5 days ago. How old is this article? Is this the same one? How old is this article? A second. Okay, so that's the same article. I don't want that one. Not really sure if they ever got a statement from him. So let's just see if this article discusses anything different than that. I'm going to look real quick. No, they don't really mention him. So I don't think they got a statement from, just mostly that he didn't want to sign off on it. So, and oops, I closed that because I was going to use that other article in there. So let me go back and pull that up. Because the other article I wanted was in there. Okay, so we're going to talk about the shooting. Okay, witnesses of deadly Texas mall shooting describe the chaotic and horrifying scene. And I heard one news report describe this as the second most deadly of the shootings so far this year, because it seems like we just have one of these almost every week, or more than one every week. As the sound of gunfire began to resonate through the Allen Premium Outlets parking lot near Dallas, panicked shoppers screamed and ducked behind rows of cars. Others sprinted across the lot, one witness video shows. Inside the sprawling complex in suburban Allen, employees, shoppers, and families with young children bolted to take cover in storage areas or back hallways, witnesses told CNN. 8 people were killed and at least 7 others wounded when a gunman opened fire at the Outlet Mall on Saturday afternoon, marking the latest act of gun violence to shatter an American community as they're enjoying activities in public places. The gunman was killed by the Allen Police Department officer who was at the mall on an unrelated call, police said. Investigators believe the shooter was acting alone. A photo obtained by CNN shows what appears to be the gunman lying on the ground after being shot. Okay. So I'm told you have some problems with YouTube. I'm not sure. You had some issues viewing. Let me see if that's an issue with viewing the stream. So I'll turn the sound down so we won't see an echo, hear an echo. So let's see how the stream looks. So how does it look? I have to go to full camera. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it looks okay right now. Hopefully, whatever was going on with YouTube has quieted down. Is it better now? Because it looked okay to me. There was a notice earlier about issues with Facebook, but that has nothing to do with an ordinary live video. It has to do with short videos. YouTube is glitching. Just fine for Nick Rich. How about you, Wes? Fine now, I rebooted my computer. Okay. I do a quick speed test just to see what it's doing here. See if the speed is as normal as usual. It's about the same. It's going out okay. It's plenty of speed going out. So I don't know. It's not audio. It's video. Okay. Nickrit says it's smooth. Okay. So it's good for 2 out of 3 of you, but ADM FLA Girl 38 is having trouble. A photo obtained by CNN shows what appears to be the gunman lying on the ground after being shot with an AR-15 style firearm nearby. He's clad in black body armor and appears to have several extra magazines strapped in his chest gear. At least 9 people were rushed to trauma facilities, 2 of whom have since died. One of the surviving victims, 3 were in critical condition and undergoing surgery, and 4 were stable. Of the surviving victims, 3 were in critical and undergoing surgery, and 4 were stable as of Saturday night. A Dallas medical group said it was treating victims as young as 5 years old on Saturday. Okay. One witness told CNN he was walking inside the mall when people behind him suddenly began running. I turned around and I saw 2 ladies rushing towards me. Then it was like someone shooting, he said. Behind the fleeing women, he said he could see a man holding his neck with blood dripping down. He huddled with others in the back of the store for about an hour until police came to get them. Other witnesses reported sheltering in place for up to 2 hours as police cleared the scene. Aerial videos showed hundreds of shoppers, some with their hands up, weaving through police cars and ambulances. They were escorted from the scene. The footage also appears to show at least 3 bodies covered by sheets outside the mall. Police say that they have identified the vehicle of the deceased suspect, which was being examined by the bomb squad as a precaution, and law enforcement tells this to CNN. Representative Keith Self, whose congressional district includes Allen, said the attack may have been more deadly if not for the quick response from law enforcement. And he said, "We owe a debt of gratitude to the first responders that ran toward the gunfire and acted swiftly to neutralize the threat." The attack is the latest on a relentless series of gun violence across the U.S. that has inflicted terror on communities as they carry out their deadly lives in schools, supermarkets, parks, and shopping malls. It comes just 2 days after authorities say an enraged gunman in Atlanta, Georgia. See, we had 2 days ago prior, so that would have been Thursday. A gunman in Atlanta, Georgia, opening fire on a medical facility, killing 1 woman and wounding 4 others. There have been nearly 200 mass shootings in the nation so far this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive, and it gives the definition of what's defined as a mass shooting. Could hear her start praying. Kimberly Blakely said she and her 14-year-old daughter were among the crowd trying to flee the parking lot during the attack. The shooting happened over and over again. It was nonstop. In her haste to get away, she drove towards where the shots were coming from before her daughter told her to turn around. But as she drove toward the exit, she said they became stuck behind a group of other cars trying to do the same. That's when she felt her car get hit twice by gunfire. I told my daughter to get down. She did, and I could hear her start praying. The pair was able to get out of the parking lot and didn't stop until they reached home, even when they realized her car's flat tire warning light had come on. We were on a mission to get out of there, she said. This shooting was deeply disturbing. A hamburger employee told CNN after she and other customers hid in a hallway behind their mall restaurant. "I never witnessed anything like this. It's very traumatic for me and already suffer from anxiety and seizures. So I think that is all of that article. But again, more and more of these shootings, because we don't do anything about the problem of too many people having guns that really shouldn't have them. So other topics. Cody's wish and Cody. I'll save that one for later. Jim's not here yet. Well, Jim's not here yet, but Jim did send us something, so I'll go back over it when Jim comes in. But Jim sent us something. And this is about something to do with people needing papers, which I presume means papers for citizenship. She says they're pushing this in Texas too. Countless construction projects in Florida come to a screeching halt as new law makes it felony to work without papers. And these are workers in Miami, Florida. I don't know if there's music on this or what. We will find out.
El gobernador de Florida, DeSantis, está promoviendo una ley que trabajar sin papeles sea una felonía y que todas las compañías o empleadores tienen que utilizar el E-Verify. O sea, va a ser imposible a los que no tenemos papeles trabajar. O sea, básicamente imposible. No vamos a poder trabajar. Entonces me gustaría que, compa, mande unos 300 personas aquí de ojos blanquitos, ciudadanos, pues todos ciudadanos, que vengan a colgar chirroc, a hacer el frame, colgar los ductos, hacer electricidad, todo. Y que mande también ese montón de gente allá para el campo, a la agricultura. Van a cosechar a ver si es cierto que van a poder hacer el trabajo que hacemos nosotros, los inmigrantes en este país. Que ellos solitos quieren ir a la quiebra. No sé qué tienen en la cabeza.
So that's in Spanish, but one of the words I could definitely understand was work, trabajar. So he was basically telling him you can't work in Florida without papers certifying that you are a citizen or that you're applying for citizenship. Biden versus GOP debt ceiling. So we have a Biden video about the debt ceiling as soon as we get past the advertising in it.
Congressional leaders are expected to meet with President Biden next week to discuss the debt ceiling. This comes as the deadline for defaulting on the nation's debt quickly approaches. The Senate Budget Committee held a hearing on Speaker Kevin McCarthy's House-approved debt limit bill just yesterday. Today, President Biden slammed the measure and Republicans' approach to handling the debt ceiling.
Unfortunately, I won't say Republican because I think they're pretty well divided, but our MAGA Republicans in Congress are threatening to do all this progress by letting us, quote, default on the debt unless we agree to their demands. The two are totally unrelated. Whether you pay the debt or not doesn't have a damn thing to do with what your budget is. What your budget is, where you're going to spend money, how you're going to raise the money, what are you going to cut, what are you going to, they're two separate issues.
Joining us now from Capitol Hill is CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane. And that sound from the president, Scott, just coming to us here at CBS News, evidence of not only lawmakers are divided over how to deal with the debt ceiling, but there is this tension between Congress and the White House. And we heard President Biden there again refer to MAGA Republicans specifically, not saying all Republicans. So with all that, what can we expect out of next week's meeting over this?
Well, there seems to be growing support, if not near universal support, for this meeting happening. A House Democrat this morning, a House Democrat from Virginia, says he is glad there's a meeting that's on the books for Tuesday. And here's the reality, and here's the reason why. With 25 days until this deadline for a possible default, two sides are miles apart and their feet are stuck in political quicksand despite all that distance. And one of the realities is that the House and the Senate are controlled by different parties. They have different priorities, and they both have to sign off on whatever deal gets to the president, which means there has to be some new combination of Republicans and Democrats that get behind whatever is going to solve the problem and avert the crisis. Take a listen to Senate Democrats and Republicans as recently as last night, indicating they remain miles apart.
Democrats haven't threatened default unless Congress also passes gun control legislation or climate legislation, even though those are desperately needed policies with broad popular support. Why not? Because crashing the global economy, if we don't get what we want, isn't policymaking. It's hostage taking and it's extremism.
The House Republicans' bill is meant to start a conversation. To start a conversation, not end it. Speaker McCarthy has said many times that he wants to negotiate with President Biden. So all the barbs and attacks on the House bill today are meaningless.
What's more, Errol, the senators and the Senate leaders are making clear at this moment, at least for now, this is a dispute for the president and the Republican Speaker of the House to work on together. The senators, in a rare move for the U.S. Senate, are taking a back seat.
Wow. You know, Scott, that would give me concern that the folks who are meant to come to an agreement aren't any closer to getting there. There was also this effort by House Democrats this week. They put in motion a maneuver to force a debt limit increase bill to the floor that could bypass Republican leaders. Does that stand any chance of being successful, or might it muddy the waters further?
It stands a chance, but based on early estimates, it doesn't stand a terribly good chance. The House minority party has this set of parliamentary maneuvers they can execute to get a vote on a floor of the House that could pass legislation the majority is unwilling to pass on its own. But those tend to be long shot or lottery ticket type strategies. House Democrats are putting up something that maybe if a few Republicans came over and voted for, would pass the House. But there's a couple complications there. First of all, they've got to get it onto the floor and get some Republican support. Tricky on a high-profile issue everybody's measuring and watching. But also, you might need more than just a few. Even though the margins are small in the U.S. House, it's possible you may need dozens of Republicans to come over to give each other political cover for such a tenuous political decision, which makes the bar even higher for success.
In summary, oy vey. Scott MacFarlane on Capitol Hill. Thanks for the update. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so the reason I show that video is because For those of you who watched the coverage, the coronation of King Charles, if you're wondering why Biden was not there, there's your reason. Biden was busy dealing with that. He's dealing with the debt ceiling discussion and getting that resolved over this weekend, trying to get things going. So that's why he wasn't overseas doing anything of the sort with King Charles' coronation, because he had to stay home and concentrate on that. And so there's your answer as to where he's been this weekend. And we're going to talk about topics today on Meet the Press. Okay. So for May 7th, Sunday, Representative Hakeem Jeffries was on. Former Governor Asa Hutchinson was on. No presidents have ever gone to a British coronation. Yeah. Regarding the coronation, I kind of used Hal's motto, which is, our full faith and credit are not at risk. There is no other place for people to safely put their money. Oh, silly dispute. Easy to blame the Republicans for a government shutdown. McCarthy is having a temper tantrum. Everybody knows that he's going to cave on a short-term extension. Wes says, I haven't seen the morning shows yet. Does that mean you're going to watch them later? Anyway, they started off with the crisis of confidence surrounding Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and this growing scrutiny for him failing to disclose payments and gifts from a top Republican donor. Senator Dick Durbin, a Democrat, said the reputation of the court is at stake. Todd continued, a new report reveals Thomas's wife received secret payments from an activist with business before the court. Senator Tom Tillis said, I do think there's work that Supreme Court should do to address these perception problems. Chuck Todd said, with public confidence in the court at a record low, what can be done to restore Americans' trust in the judicial branch, plus default danger? As the deadline nears for the government to pay its bills, President Biden faces off with House Republicans who want to negotiate spending cuts. The president said, we're not a deadbeat nation, we pay our bills. Todd asked, does Biden have a plan to get Republicans to work with him? Speaker Kevin McCarthy said we're the only ones to lift the debt limit to make sure this economy is not in jeopardy. Hakeem Jeffries said President Biden has produced a budget. House Republicans produced a ransom note. Pretty good assessment there, yes. Todd continues, I'll talk to House Democratic leader Jeffries, and guilty as charged. 4 members of the far-right Proud Boys were found guilty of the high crime of seditious conspiracy. It's the 3rd time the Justice Department has secured convictions for the Jan 6 attack. Jim says there will be no fault. Biden will discard notion of debt ceiling based on the 14th Amendment. In a clip, Attorney General Merrick Garland said our work will continue. By the way, each one of these segments, flipping back and forth between speakers, except when it's Chuck Todd, and this opening segment of this show is a video clip from somebody. And you probably know that already, but if you don't, now you do. Chuck Todd asked, what do convictions mean for potential prosecution of Donald Trump for his role in trying to overturn the 2020 election? I'll talk to former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who is challenging Trump for the Republican nomination. Joining me for insight and analysis, okay, he introduces the panel. I probably won't talk about the panel because usually I see the panel as too biased. So that's why when I go over these discussions of Meet the Press, I don't usually talk about what the panel says. Okay, and then he talks about the shooting, which we talked about already. Second deadliest mass shooting in the calendar year. He talks about the other recent shooting in Texas where the man shot people just because they were asking him to stop firing a gun in his lawn. And early in the week, 6 people were killed in Henrietta, Oklahoma. And we talked about the Atlanta shooting in the medical office building. And despite all of these shootings, there's been no change in political response to the gun crisis. He says Todd, it's another example of our broken political situation where polarization has made governing any action impossible, with bases of both parties punishing anybody that seeks any sort of common ground. We're seeing it, he says, in the response to the judicial branch where there's clearly a growing cancer on the Supreme Court. A body that used to pride itself on judicial independence is now perceived as just another partisan branch of government in a polarized nation. In the eyes of the American public, the justices' robes are not black anymore, they're red and blue. Last year, just 1 in 4 Americans said they had a great deal of confidence or quite a bit of confidence in the Supreme Court, according to a Gallup poll, the lowest rating in 50 years. And that was after the leak of the draft of the Dobbs opinion on abortion and before what we're dealing with right now, which is a skew of ethics issues involving justices. What started out as a story about Clarence Thomas accepting luxury vacations from a billionaire donor has become a flood of headlines questioning the court's overall ethics, and Thomas himself, with a private school tuition for his great nephew being paid for, Thomas's mother's home being paid for, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to a nonprofit that then paid a 6-figure salary to his wife, Jenny, and another person paying Jenny Thomas under the table who had business before the court. Meanwhile, Thomas has not responded to any of these charges. And he simply came out saying that these trips with close personal friends were not reportable. Democrats are demanding a formal ethics code for the Supreme Court, which has no binding code of ethical conduct, which is what is demanded of other federal judges in America. But Republicans right now are afraid of angering their base or giving the left anything, and are rallying around Thomas, rejecting any tightening of ethics rules. Senator John Cornyn said in a taped clip, he's obviously been targeted because he's a conservative black man and he's on the Supreme Court in an effort to undercut the legitimacy of the court. Senator Tom Tillis said many people, some in the media, many in Congress want to make this about Justice Thomas, but you can't make this issue about Justice Thomas unless you make it about any number of other justices who had similar situations that they're dealing with. Of course, he doesn't list any. When will the link between Crow and Kavanaugh come out? Asked Jim. Sorry, Dean Obadala. Sorry for the loss of your mom. Now the same broken partisan politics eroding the Supreme Court's reputation are making it impossible for members of Congress to move forward and make deals and legislate, whether it's on addressing mass shootings, on immigration with Title 42 set to expire, or on the debt limit with the risk of default coming as soon as the end of the month. So leaders from both parties prepare to meet the White House on Tuesday. President Biden, who claims he's not negotiating right now on the debt ceiling, is clearly preparing to negotiate on the debt ceiling, but he clearly hopes he can drive a wedge between Republicans as he does it. Biden said in a clip, there's a Republican Party and then there's MAGA Republicans, and the MAGA Republicans really have put him in a position where in order to stay speaker, he has to agree to things that maybe he believes but are just extreme. Then Chuck Todd brought on Hakeem Jeffries to speak. They went through their introduction. And he asked him about the meeting he's having with a group of 4 congressional leaders and the president, including Speaker McCarthy, Majority Leader Schumer, and Senate Republican Leader Mitch McConnell, and yourself, asking if they could call these talks negotiations and whether anything is on the table. Hakeem Jeffries said, "It's an important discussion. I'm thankful the president has called us together. We need to do 2 things. We have to make sure America pays its bills to avoid a dangerous default on our debt in a manner that would blow up the United States economy, likely trigger a job-killing recession, cost us millions of good-paying jobs, crash the stock market, adversely impact the retirement security of millions of Americans. It will dramatically raise costs for almost everyone. That has to be avoided. One way to do that is to make sure we raise the debt ceiling in a manner consistent with what has been done 100 times under the Democratic presidents and Republican presidents." At the same time, President Biden is continuing to make clear that we have a discussion about the right balance of spending, investments, and revenues to make life better for everyday Americans, to impact in a favorable way the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people. Todd asked, "Do you accept that you're not going to get a clean debt ceiling hike?" Hakeem Jeffries said, "I do not, because we have constitutional responsibility to make sure that we protect the full faith and credit of the United States of America. Everyday Americans understand this principle. If you have a bill, you need to pay for it. If you fail to pay for it, it's going to adversely affect your credit rating. Your credit score will drop. If your credit score drops, your costs are going to go up. If America defaults on its bills, that's exactly what's going to happen, and everyone's going to pay the price. So I accept the only responsible thing to do is what Democrats did in the previous administration, where we helped President Trump raise the debt ceiling and avoid default 3 different times, notwithstanding the fact that in our 247-year history, 25% of America's debt was acquired during the Trump administration, and yet we avoided the default without gamesmanship, without showmanship, without partisanship. That's what the MAGA extreme Republicans should do this time around." Todd says, "I understand what you want them to do, but I know they won't accept that premise of talking of the Republicans. You have almost every Senate Republican, 43 of them, saying they're not going to raise the debt ceiling without some sort of quid pro quo on cuts or something like that. You've got independent groups, including Chamber of Commerce, Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, normally partisan group. They have said, look, Republicans have done their job. You may not like the bill the House passed, but they did do something. Shouldn't Democrats respond with a counter proposal? Hakeem Jeffries said, the president has continuously made this clear, and he produced this budget 2 months ago. It's a budget that will invest in protecting Social Security. Hi, TV2 Live. Hi, Rosebud. Welcome. It's going to strengthen the economy in a way that builds the economy and works for everyday Americans. An economy from the middle out and the ground up, not the top down. And Biden's budget will also cut the deficit by $3 trillion. We've been waiting for months for Republicans to articulate their position. They didn't produce a budget. What they did was produce a ransom note. That's what the Default on America Act is. And effectively what they're saying to the American people is that you either accept these dramatic cuts to Medicaid spending for disabled children and for elderly Americans, cuts to law enforcement, which they claim to support, cuts to education, cuts to health care, cuts to nutrition assistance for food insecure Americans, which amounts to 30 million people throughout the country. Either Republicans want us to accept these dramatic cuts or accept a catastrophic default on our nation's debt. That is what is unreasonable. And hopefully in the next few days, they'll come to their senses and do what's right by the American people. Todd suggests that it's typical, your essential thing to do is to short-term punt, bump the debt ceiling up till this September 30th, and get things going, which we tend to do from time to time, year after year, in these times. But Hakeem Jeffries says, I don't think the responsible thing to do is to kick the can down the road when the president has been saying for much, the position of leader Schumer and the position of the House Democrats has been, we have to avoid a default. America should pay its bills, protect the full faith and credit of the United States of America. But we're open to having a discussion about what type of investments, what type of spending, what type of revenues are appropriate in order to protect the health and safety and the economic well-being of the American people. That's a process that's available to us right now. I don't think we need to delay those discussions for a few months. Todd continues to ask him about, are you ruling out any bumping it to September? He says, well, we have to avoid default, period, full stop. I think that's what's in front of us right now. The president has convened a very important discussion on Tuesday, so we hopefully can find a way forward to do what's necessary, continue to strengthen our economy in a manner that benefits everyday Americans. So Todd asks him, are you following the president's lead here? And if the president and Speaker McCarthy come up with some sort of handshake, would the Democrats follow that presidential lead? Hakeem Jeffries says, we're in lockstep right now in terms of the path forward the president has laid out. Ultimately, everyone evaluates on the merits on any particular piece of legislation that is presented to us, but we are in lockstep with President Biden. We're in lockstep with Senate Democrats. We want to do the right thing for the American people. That means paying our bills and simultaneously having this discussion about the future and what spending can look like, anchored in the president's budget proposal. Jim, you keep mentioning Amendment 14. As I thought, Amendment 14, equal protection and other rights. So let me see what's in that. So equal protection under the law is part of that. It's probably not what you're referencing. Unless you mean equal protection. I'm reading. I'm not reading out loud, but I am reading really quick. So I'm just reading real quick. Article 4, Section 1. Okay, Article 4, Section 1. Full faith and credit shall be given to each state in the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state, and a Congress may by general laws prescribe the manner in which acts and records and proceedings shall be proved in effect thereof. Is that the one? Not sure what you're referencing. No, that's okay. Jim will eventually reference the one that he wants, and we'll read it together. But anyway. Okay, so I read most of that. Next, Chuck asked him, he asked him about Title 42. Do you believe the administration is prepared for what's coming to the border? Oh, no worries, Jim. You got plenty of time. I do believe the administration is prepared. I know Secretary Mayorkas was there at the border this week. Steps are being taken to make sure that there is order at the border, but that it should be done in a way that is consistent with two principles. One is the rule of law, but two, our history as a compassionate nation, as a nation of immigrants. I think that the administration is preparing in an all hands on deck way to make sure that we move forward beyond this Title 42 movement, that we're in a position to absorb what takes place. At the same time, we need to begin to have a real bipartisan discussion on comprehensive immigration reform, and I hope that my Republican colleagues will come to the table to have those discussions. I know you have full confidence in the plan, said Todd. A lot of border Democrats do not. Mark Kelly said, I don't have a high level of confidence. Ruben Gallego said, I have heard repeated concerns about a lack of information. Kristen Cinemas, who is known not a Democrat anymore, but caucuses with them, said despite our repeated calls, the administration failed to prepare a working plan for the end of Title 42. Let me ask you this in the next couple of weeks. If this doesn't look like it's working, would you be in favor of reinstated Title 42 powers? There's a bill in the Senate right now that might do that. If that is something that doesn't work, would you be open to it? Hakeem Jeffries said, I think that's premature. I think we have to deal with the situation that is in front of us right now and support the administration to make sure there are resources at the border to deal with post-Title 42 environment and do it in a way consistent with both the rule of law that we want it, order at the border, and at the same time do it in a compassionate way, which is consistent with who we are as a nation. 14A, equal protection and other rights. The validity of public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pension and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. So that's what Jim's got. The validity of public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. So basically that says that once you incur the debt must be paid. Thanks, Jim. Todd asked him about a poll that says there's a startling divide between former President Trump and current President Biden, and said that Hakeem Jeffries made a robust case that President Biden's been a good steward for the economy. The country here in this poll, majority believe former President Trump did a better job of handling the economy at 54% versus 36% for Biden. Yeah, but polls do not decide who becomes president. Polls merely show you what the poll people have to say. Why do you think the public perception of the president's handling of the economy is so poor compared to the numbers you're citing? Hakeem Jeffries said there's just one poll. I've seen other public opinion surveys that have indicated there's a closer approximation between the actual reality of the incredible job that president has done with respect to the economy. Record low unemployment, more than 12 million good paying jobs have been created, reduce the deficit by $1.7 trillion just in his first 2 years. That's a record for a similar period of time in American history for any American president. And of course, President Biden recognized more needs to be done to continue to build out an economy that benefits every American's coming out of COVID and an inflationary environment. I think when all is said and done and President Biden is on the campaign trail, able to make his case against the extreme MAGA Republicans who are extreme on reproductive freedom, extreme on democracy, extreme on Social Security and Medicare, extreme in their unwillingness to deal with the gun violence epidemic and crisis, extreme on pretty much every issue out there. I believe American people will see fit to reelect President Biden and reelect him comfortably. And then they said their goodbyes. So then Chuck Todd talked to Asa Hutchinson, former governor, who had said that he thought that Trump should be out of the primary. Who says he's running for president because he knows the best of America is ahead of us. Todd asked him, do you really think you have a message for post-Trump era when Donald Trump still exists? And he says, I think my message I presented is about the future. He cites that when you look at the rule of law, the challenge of crime in our cities, the challenge of border security, that's where we simply need to enforce the law. And that is the background that I bring to this campaign. Whenever you look at reducing the size of federal government and controlling spending, I presented that idea to plan to reduce state federal civilian employment by 10%. I can do that because we reduced it by 14% in Arkansas. These are specific plans that I presented. It's about the future, about the strength of America. It's about our leadership. So it's not about the past, it's about the future. And I think that resonates. So he's painting a line between himself and President Trump where he says that he's going to be conservative, he's going to cut the government, he's not going to worry about the past, obviously, because Trump has always, America was so good in the past and you need to put me back in because we need to go back to that past. And Hutchinson's basically saying, no, we need to go forward into the future. But we need to he says we need to be more conservative. And so Todd comes back to him and says that having these right positions that maybe the Republican Party supports and opposed doesn't seem to translate to votes. He says that I look at your positions and in theory, it makes a ton of sense to me that you should be able to unite this party around what you're selling. And in the past, that would be true. In the past, what Hutchinson is selling would unite the party around him. But as Todd points out, you're looking for something else. Trump's a fighter. He says what I think you've heard are all the different words. When Todd says that, he's basically saying the reason people support Trump is because Trump supports what they think already. He reinforces their thinking. Whether you want to call that thinking or not is another matter. But he reinforces what they believe. This is what Trump does to appeal to his base. And he's asking him, how do you appeal to that voter? That voter that actually likes what Trump sells. Yes, Jim, you're absolutely correct. The Republican Party that Hutchinson represents a small majority of the GOP today. Yep. Hutchinson says that's true. You've got to convince the voters that you're going to fight for them. And whatever you look at my history of fighting against the establishment in Arkansas, but also in Congress and balancing the budget, this is proof of record that somebody who does fight for them. All that would be true if we were not talking about 2023. I mean, if we were talking about 2000. And if Asa Hutchinson was George W. Bush, and this was the year 2000, his message would sell. I don't see it as selling in 2023. Not with Trump still out there. Not with all those people in his party looking for somebody, either Trump himself or somebody like Trump. But Hutchinson goes on thinking, whenever you look at the growing economy and challenge the high interest rates, high inflation, economy is number one issue that will face Americans as we go into 2024. The constant rhetoric, it's always the pocketbook of the American people that makes them vote one way or the other. So he sees it that the pocketbook will make them vote for him. And he sees it, he says that we don't want a repeat of 2020 with the Trump-Biden race. He thinks you need something different that they can win on. And then Todd asked him, why do you think right now Republican voters think Trump's the best candidate? Hutchinson responds, you look back to the true numbers, which is after the last midterm elections, and his numbers were down. He was responsible for a lot of failure in the growth that we expected and wins in the number of different states. His numbers are down. His numbers have gone up because he's played the victim. People believe he's been picked on because of some prosecutions. I joke in some ways that his campaign manager is Alvin Bragg of New York City, that indictment caused those numbers to go up because they don't believe they're fair. This will settle out over time. And so let's judge it, understanding we're early on in the campaign. We've got a lot more room to go. So he thinks that all of this support for Trump will settle down. Yes, Rosebud, Republicans are rake steppers. They're stepping on rakes. It's funny you bring up the legal issue, says Todd, the seditious conspiracy convictions of the Proud Boys. That was a tall task for justice to prove that case. They're able to prove it. You have experience dealing in the Justice Department as a former U.S. attorney. Were you surprised they were successful? Do you think this is a dire outcome for the former president? Hutchinson says they were difficult cases to make, a high bar, and they were successful in it. I think it really reflects the seriousness of the offense of January 6th and undermining our democracy and how seriously the jury considers this and found them guilty of that. Wherever you look at the impact of the future, Donald Trump has more responsibility for what happened on January 6th. The question is whether there is a criminal responsibility, and that's a judgment of the Department of Justice going to have to make. And we were going to have in America to go to a different direction, but it's going to be through the ballot box and not what happens in the courtroom. And that's what I want us to focus on. So he wants to focus on the ballot box. So he is in solidarity. Yes, he is hoping that Trump gets convicted and he'll step in the vacuum, but he doesn't want to get into the courtroom deciding the direction of things, because he knows that's a landmine for him to step on that and say that he supports too much what's going on in the court. Hello, Joey. He keeps talking about persuading Americans to go in a different direction. Todd asked him, are you committing to support the Republican nominee even if it's Trump? Hutchinson says, I expect to be on the debate stage. We're still looking at what is required for that in terms of pledge, but yes, I'm sure that the candidates that are going to be participating in that believe they're going to be the nominee, and so we're going to support the nominee, but I want to be on that debate stage. I think it's important, and we're working very hard to get there, and let's see. I'm not sure whether Donald Trump's going to be there or not. I hope that he will be. I think it's important, but let's see how that develops. Okay, so he does not want to rule out Trump being on the debate stage. He probably won't be convicted before the 2024 election. Yep, Jim, he's got to walk that fine line. Todd asks, if you think that Trump doesn't show up for debates, does it make it easier for you not to commit to support the nominee? Well, that reflects the question of who he will support. If he's not the nominee, he'll drop in polls, said Hutchinson, and that's why I think he will ultimately be there. It's important for the American people to hear, particularly the Republican voters, to hear what the candidates say about the future, their ideas for it, as if Trump ever says anything about his ideas. He just repeats the same diatribe over and over again. Yeah, he might not have a court date before the 2024 election. We'll have to wait and see. To hear what the candidates say about the future, their ideas for it, to engage in that debate and defend their positions. So that's what the expectation is. And I think everybody has an obligation to participate in that. And let me take this moment to say that the only thing that Trump would ever say at a debate is, I was so wonderful as your president. I did this, I did that. Everything was wonderful under me, and blah, blah, blah. And that's all he's going to say. He's going to say that he was robbed of the 2020 election and he needs another chance to win. That's all he's going to say. What else can he say? He can't actually run on his real record. The only other thing he can say is he can continue to redirect all of his failures onto Biden. That's all he can say. Joey says, I don't know if Trump will ever support anyone if he's not the top nominee. And he will continue to say he's the only choice. Thanks, Nick Rich, for stopping by. So Todd asked him again about the mass shootings this week. Do these recent shootings took place in states that have expanded the rights of gun owners? If we want to tackle the mental health issue, how do you do it without regulating the firearm? Hutchinson responded, we've had mass shootings that occurred in blue states and states that have significant restrictions on firearms, and so they happen across America. This is a serious issue for us. It breaks everyone's heart and causes everybody to think, what can we do to prevent this or reduce the deaths by violence? Mental health is a significant part of this that we need to invest in. You talked earlier about that there's not any bipartisan consensus. We did last year find a bipartisan consensus to address some issues after the Uvalde shooting in Texas, and I applaud Senator Cornyn for his leadership on that. So we just have to continue to look at what makes a difference, what fits within our constitutional framework. And right now there is consensus on addressing the mental health crisis we have in America, particularly as it came out of the pandemic. Then Todd asked him about the current crisis of confidence in the Supreme Court, telling him that in the 1990s, he led a bipartisan effort regarding the rebuke of the ethics investigation into Newt Gingrich, that Gingrich had to pay a hefty fine, but was accepted by the public because it was bipartisan, and says we need this with the Supreme Court. It feels like there isn't accepting a premise that the court has an ethical problem. Hutchinson said this is an important issue, and whenever you look at the confidence of the Supreme Court, it's critical to the operation of our democracy. But if you look back in history, during the Warren Court, they had controversial decision, Brown versus Board of Education. And for a long time, the court was under extraordinary criticism. The confidence level was diminished. That's built back up over time. You have a controversial decision and history is repeating itself. You've got, in this case, the Democrats undermining a court, says Hutchinson. First of all, wanting to pack it with more than 9, which has been our historic number. And then secondly, these allegations against Justice Thomas. The court needs to be transparent, first of all. They need to be clear on what their reporting rules are. They also need to review those to make sure they're very similar to other public officials and branches of government, which has broad reporting requirements. Clearly, they've not been sufficient. They've changed those. Jim says, and Gingrich should have been banned from any political activity. Excuse me. Hutchinson said, I think they need this step simply in terms of their transparency so the American people understand what the rules are and what's required is similar to other public officials. Todd says, sounds like you think Chief Justice Robert needs to come out and publicly state what you just said. Hutchinson said, I think there needs to be a clear set of rules and needs to be openness about it so everybody knows what the rules are. Those are important. Every public official has to follow those. They can set those. They should just set those versus the Congress of the United States because they are a separate branch of government. So he's basically saying that the Supreme Court should set the rules and state the rules and follow the rules. Jim says they said they have changed their reporting requirements, but we only have their word on that. The problem we get into is that some of the American people, particularly the Democrats, would like to have one branch of government tell the other branch of government what to do, but you get into a constitutional crisis if you give one branch of government too much power over another branch of government, because you're supposed to have the 3 branches of government and you're supposed to have them independent of each other, the check and balance of each other, but you're not supposed to give one so much power to rule over the other, because there would go all the checks and balances. So, but maybe you need a separate body that doesn't consist of any of the 3 to adjudicate what goes on with all 3 whenever any of the 3 steps out of its bounds. Not giving that body too much power, but maybe, just saying, hey, you need to do this. You need to do that. Kind of like a federal version of a citizens commission. Okay, then they say their goodbyes. So that's... Then he talks about the royal family. Do y'all want to talk about the royal family? Honestly, probably don't really want to talk about the royal family. I would just simply say that it was interesting where some in the family were seated based on their thing. Okay, what did they talk about? No royals. Chief Justice Robert in a tape said, most important thing for the public to understand is we are not a political branch of government. They don't elect us. If they don't like what we're doing, it's more or less just too bad. Clarence Thomas said, we are as judges in the least democratic branch of government. We have lifetime appointments. We make very, very important decisions, and we do not stand for re-election. I may talk about the flaws, but I also point out the importance of the legislative and oversight process. This process is necessary, and it has, to me, become more clearly necessary since I became a judge. And Todd talked to the panel and says basically that Thomas is saying, yeah, he's wrong. He is wrong, Jim. They shouldn't be above the law. It would be different if they were only in there for a short period of time and not a lifetime appointment. You know, if they were appointed to act on a short period of time and not lifetime, it'd be totally different because you could like have the president pick them and only be there for 8 years after that, and then some other president could pick them. But they're just there for too long, because if you get a president like Trump that doesn't really care about the American people and really only appoints them to try to preserve his existence as president, that's really, really bad. Or to push a specific agenda. So the panel talks about that. I don't really care to talk too much about the panel. I don't know if that's the end of the thing. Was there another guest? I think that's all panel. Panel. So there is a story about LGBTQ rights. So Tennessee passed the first anti-drag law in March. Antonia Hilton, as a transgender woman, was raised in Tennessee. She spent years hiding who she was. It wasn't until she turned 18 and stepped out on her first drag show stage that she realized it didn't have to be that way. I didn't have the words for it. It was one of the few times I felt powerful. I felt seen. I felt right in my skin. I can do anything I need to do when I'm in drag. Wait, are all the children out of the building? Are there any children? Look around. If you're a child, raise your hand. Not emotionally, I mean like legally. For Story and her friend who performs under the name Harry Scary, it's begun to feel like their very existence is a political act. The agenda is to just exist and to feel valid. The agenda is to be able to go to the bathroom without having to worry about being punched in the face. State Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson, a Republican from Franklin, Tennessee, sponsored the new restrictive legislation. The law targets adult-oriented performances that are harmful to minors. It doesn't say exactly how performances will be determined to be harmful or sexual. Have you been to drag shows? He hasn't, but he's seen videos. Of drag, and I've been to places where a man was dressed as a woman and performing or singing. Maybe they were dressed. It was a Halloween party and they were dressed up as Dolly Parton. Of course I have. Are you trying to send a signal? He says, of course not. That some types of communities, some types of people aren't welcome here in Tennessee. He says, the only signal I'm trying to send is that you shouldn't be sexually graphic. You shouldn't be simulating sex acts in front of children. So those are the tapes. You can watch the full episode on this anti-drag movement right now on Peacock. So there's more to that. Then they get into something with Trump. We're talking about the president's various legal issues. And he cites the economy again in the ABC poll, saying Trump was 54% favorable, Biden was 36% favorable. But 1/4 of voters would like to see Trump prosecuted for various crimes, think he should be prosecuted. We're picking Trump over Biden. Does it make it impossible to knock Trump out of the nomination? Sarah Fagan says, I don't think it's impossible to knock him out. And you've got to remember it's going to be a long process. What happens in Iowa happens in New Hampshire, South Carolina, what's going to be very consequential. And even if a candidate is expected to get 10%, gets 15%, it becomes a week of great press for the person. I do think it's going to be difficult to beat Trump, don't get me wrong. But if you analyze polling and you ask questions about 4 different ways, Trump's hard support is about 14%. It is not 40. You've got a bunch of people who are for him today that are open to other people, and that's the path these folks have to put together. Jim asks, so are Elvis the Pelvis videos outlawed in Tennessee? You would think, wouldn't you, Jim? The line poll that ought to go out through the White House, that's economic number. If this election is not about abortion rights, they're in trouble, says Todd. Teresa Kumar says it's going to be the economy, and I think it's going to be about economy and education. And she believes that the Republicans are the ones talking about education. She says that one of the reasons why people at Voto Latino supported Trump is because they literally believe he gave them the checks that he signed. So this is still the panel. And then we get into the business about Trump and the photo who he thinks is Marla, his Maples, his former wife, saying he thinks it's Marla Maples. But even Elaine Habak corrects him and says that's Carol. And he's told that person you just pointed to is E. Jean Carroll. And he's still being him and hawing, saying, I don't know, that was this picture. So he can't identify his own wife in a picture, and he can't tell Ms. Carroll from his wife. Mark Leibovich says this is not going to take his supporters away from him. So, yep, that's the case going on so far. It's like they're bringing up this old recording of Trump and not being, or claiming not to be able to identify Carl. So they must have gone into that on today's show. Okay, what was the other topic? Jim, we went over your topic earlier, but we'll repeat it real quick. Jim had this video for us.
Tienen que utilizar el E-Verify. O sea, va a ser imposible a los que no tenemos papeles trabajar. O sea, básicamente imposible. No vamos a poder trabajar. Entonces me gustaría que compa mande unos.
So the entire video is in Spanish, but the word trabajar, which means work, is mentioned. So the video is obviously about the fact that you can't get any work in Miami, Florida, if you don't have official papers deeming you a citizen or somebody applying for citizenship. And so that's the issue going on right now in Florida, is that a new law has kept people who do not have citizenship from being able to work. So that was one of the ones that Jim brought us. Let's see, we talked about that. We did talk about the court testimony. And yesterday on the Kentucky Derby, I just want to talk about this. One of the horses was called Cody's Wish. Wasn't actually in the actual headliner race. But the horse was called Cody's Wish. Now, the fascinating thing about Cody's Wish is a horse that a young boy named Cody, who has a debilitating disease that prevents him from speaking with his own voice and reduces his motor skills, wished to meet a horse. It was one of the things that he wanted to do. And so they took him out to meet these horses. And the one horse that he met came up to him and put his nose up to the boy's body and made friends with him. And so they called that horse Cody's Wish. And So the family became associated with the horse. And that horse continued to prove why he's considered one of the best horses in the world Saturday during the Grade 1 Churchill Downs Stakes at Churchill Downs. This is not the headliner race. Making his 5-year-old debut, Cody's Wish powered to the lead in a closing stretch to win by 4 3/4 lengths over Hoist the Gold. He marked his 5th straight victory, coming nearly a year to the day since he captured the Westchester Stakes at Belmont Park to start his winning streak, and won despite not racing since Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile in Keeneland last November. They talk about the trainer, but I don't know if they get into the details about the horse. They talk about the winnings. So let's see if this article talks about the young man. Okay, here we go. Cody's Wish continued success has extra meaning, Alvarado said, because of his namesake, Cody Dorman, a Richmond native who was born with Wolff-Hirschhorn syndrome. The NBC broadcast ran a feature on the two's relationship before the race. Alvarado said, "It has me very humble, makes me keep my feet on the ground 24/7, and very appreciative for everything that we have. I always say we have everything we need. We probably want more stuff. We have everything we need." And this is Cody. Let me see his name. Cody Dorman. So this is the young man in the wheelchair that the horse is named for. It's named for him because he had a wish to go meet this horse, and he goes and watches him race, and the family just gets so much excitement when the horse wins. So let's see. They linked us to that. Let's see if we can watch that. I was up here. I went back too quickly. No, I scrolled too fast. I went right by it. Yeah, it's probably in the next paragraph. There it is. That's it right there. Now hopefully they'll let us air this.
At Keeneland Racecourse in Lexington, Kentucky, just a few miles from the home of the Dorman family, parents Kelly and Leslie, and their kids, Kylie and Cody.
See, okay, buddy?
4 years earlier, as part of Make-A-Wish Day at Keeneland, Cody asked to meet a racehorse. So the Dormans were invited to nearby Gainesboro Farm. Of the 40 foals on the farm that day, one walked up to Cody.
He put his nose.
So if you didn't catch that number, out of 40 horses, this one horse walked up to the boy.
In Cody's lap, and it just started from that moment.
It was a winning day for a young man who got a tough draw. Cody was born with Wolff-Hirschhorn syndrome, and he spent a lifetime overcoming long odds.
We knew when he was born that there was something wrong. He was in the NIC unit for 2 weeks. He come home on oxygen. They told us he would only live 2 years, and he is getting ready to turn 17. Yep.
Blue horse, what do you see? I see a green frog.
Cody has fought for every one of those 17 years, enduring nearly 50 surgeries. In 2020, as Cody's health was worsening, his parents got the idea to go back and visit that horse they had met 2 years earlier. By now, the horse was fully grown and testy and unpredictable. No one expected the same welcome that Cody received on his first visit, which is why you might say what happened next was miraculous. Cody got another wish.
And Cody, you know, that deep belly laugh, I can count on one hand the number of times I've heard him do that. And he done it instantly.
From that day on, it was just a different child. It changed everything.
Cody, why do you think you have such a special connection to this horse?
Because he found me, and he hasn't forgotten me. He has always looked for me, and we have the same heart. We never give up.
Cody's wish needed every bit of that heart in the Breeders' Cup.
All in line, ready for the start. Bravo! They're off in the dirt mile. Cody's wish broke near the back of the pack.
It was by far the deepest field he'd ever faced, and he quickly dropped to the back of the pack.
Senor Buscador and Cody's wish are biding their time. Cyberknife is getting going, and here comes Cody's wish.
But once he started into that last turn, the jets kicked in, and here he comes.
Cody's wish in the blue colors, blazing by horses on the far outside. And they're into the stretch. It's Cody's wish and Cyberknife.
And when they went by us, they were neck and neck.
Cyberknife on the inside. Cody's wish on the outside. They're coming down to the finish. Here's the wire. Oh, the wish has come true. That one's for you, Cody.
Just want to thank everybody that supported this, everybody that smiled from it. But one thank you we got to give is for that big horse right over there. He's the one that started all this, and we didn't pick him. He picked us. He picked us.
It was so magical, especially seeing so many happy people. I was just so proud for Cody's wish. I want to thank God for letting me have this experience. He saved my life, without a doubt.
His bond with Cody's wish has lifted Cody Dorman's spirits in ways that are profound and lasting. 7 days ago, Cody went to the prom. Even on nights like this, there are moments that reveal how hard Cody and his family fight every day.
Look at you.
But look hard enough, and you can also see what it looks like when a wish comes true, and how a racehorse has made all the difference in a boy's life.
I think it's kept him going after the Breeders' Cup. Cody continues to improve.
It's so exciting. He's not even supposed to be here, and him going into prom. I'm just so proud of him. Just proud of him.
I think that horse has the legs he wasn't given. Put those two together, they make kind of a perfect one, I guess.
He always makes me smile. I love when we just get to hang out together. I really hope this has helped someone else and makes them smile also. Thank you, Cody's wish. You are a very special horse and a very special friend.
So I thought you really enjoyed that. I know I did. I think that is a very good story, you know, because all of these other stories are political, they're active. We have a lot of negative stories. We have a lot of killing and death, particularly with these mass shootings. We need a good feel-good story every once in a while. And that one is definitely it. So So that's about an hour of stuff. Let's see what else happened in the news. What we have for headlines. What do we have? Why is Mike Pence trending? Oh, okay. Here's one. This is apparently something he sent that probably got him to trend. Yesterday, Mike Pence said, I stand with Justice Clarence Thomas and call on every American to join me in defending this good man and principled jurist. He is about as far off base in defending Clarence Thomas as he is in defending his former boss, former President Trump. This is one person's opinion about that. This person says, regarding the guy that has paid Justice Thomas a lot of money, he says, I don't always buy judges, but when I do, I buy Clarence Thomas. Like the popular memes. There's a picture of supposedly Robert Kennedy is running against Trump for the Republican nomination, but interesting is that this picture exists with Robert Kennedy, who is seen here with former President Trump and Vice President former Mike Pence. So that's on that tweet. What is this about? Sandy. So here's a good thing pointing about Sandy Hook. It says, NRA, sacrificing America's school children since 1999. Let me see, Sandy Hook. Okay, it's not the anniversary of that. That was December 14th, 2012. So I guess people are just bringing it up in relationship to all the other shootings. This one also. points out the statistic that the Allen shooting was an AR-15, Aurora was an AR-15, Poway was an AR-15, Uvalde was an AR-15, Buffalo was an AR-15, Boulder was an AR-15, Orlando was an AR-15, Parkland was an AR-15, Las Vegas was an AR-15, Sandy Hook was an AR-15, the Waffle House shooting was an AR-15, Highland Park was an AR-15, San Bernardino was an AR-15, Midland, Odessa was an AR-15, Sutherland Springs was an AR-15, but yet what do the Republicans do? They run around displaying pins of the AR-15 in solidarity with the gun, not with doing something about the violence that is wrought with the gun. Trending now, Brownsville. Why is Brownsville trending? Oh, okay. This happened too, unfortunately. This is from 6 hours ago.
Breaking news just coming in now. Word of yet another tragedy unfolding at this hour in the state of Texas. These pictures coming in from Brownsville, Texas. The Associated Press reporting that 7 people are dead and at least 6 are hurt after they were hit by a vehicle you see right there. We see a heavily damaged Range Rover SUV in these pictures. NBC's Ken Delaney is reporting that a senior law enforcement official says someone drove a vehicle into a group of immigrants at a Catholic Charities facility in Brownsville. They believe this was, in fact, an intentional act. Our affiliate reporting the driver was arrested for reckless driving. We're working to get more information this hour on this. But again, we have 7 people reported dead after a vehicle ran into them, drove into them, it seems, intentionally. This morning in the border city of Brownsville, Texas. We're going to bring you more information as we get it.
Just horrific. Absolutely horrific. Okay, news trending. Why is Tumblr trending in technology? Just trending stuff, not anything really important. Okay. Delaware is trending. Why is that? So those are negative attacks against Biden. This is also a statement on all the gun violence. Points the blame at Texas and says the sound of children screaming has been removed. Couple of political statements too also on that topic. Had enough, vote every Republican out of office. And the other one says, remember, the Texas shooter didn't act alone. He was assisted by 50 senators, 210 House members, and the NRA. Pass it on. What is this? Extremists, Republicans aren't powerless. They choose to let these mass killings happen. The spineless cowards are beholden to the NRA blood money. Representative Torres, Democrat, New York, is right. They shouldn't be in Congress. So let's see what he has to say.
Now, you know, we had this terrible shooting this week. I wanted to ask you about gun reform. I mean, Republicans, they don't want to support background checks. They mental fund programs. I mean, what do we do about this? How do we deal with them?
Look, whenever there's a mass shooting, Republicans are quick to bring up mental illness.
Right.
Every society on earth has mental illness. We are the only wealthy country that has an epidemic of gun violence and mass shootings.
True that.
That is not, like, let's be clear, it's not an inevitability. It's a public policy choice. Like, we as a society have chosen to put our own children at risk of gun violence. And there are Republicans who claim we're powerless because there's evil in the world. And my view is, if you're too powerless to protect children from mass murder, then you have no business being in Congress.
Yes.
Like, what are you?
Yes. That's why I voted for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, if you voted for me without being in my district, that's voter fraud. So I want
No, that's why I campaigned for you.
I appreciate that.
I didn't vote twice.
I appreciate that.
I tried, but I couldn't.
Although your endorsement is an illegal contribution, and we just had a former president indicted
No,
for that.
I didn't contribute. I stomped for you.
I appreciate
it. Yeah. That's why you're my new embassy show, the docuseries that I'm doing at Leguizamo does America. You're in my third episode.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richie. That was a blast, man. Thank you for coming on.
Okay, so that was cool. Probably get a few copyright strikes today, perhaps, but you watch today's show live, you get to see it. If they copyright strike us and pull our video, oh well. What do we got trending here? What else? Anything else? Why is the Washington Post trending? Okay, this is an interesting one. Breaking news. Let's make this big enough for you to see. Breaking. It says, the Washington Post drops bombshell, reveals that the Allen, Texas mass shooter who gunned down 8 innocent mall goers had a fascination with white supremacist or neo-Nazi beliefs that are now being examined by investigators as a possible motive for the attack. The report also reveals that he was wearing, quote, a patch on his chest that said RWDS, an acronym that stands for White Wing Death Squad. The phrase is popular among right-wing extremists, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists. Enough is enough. Trump and his enablers have emboldened an ugly undercurrent of white supremacy that is now wreaking havoc on America. We can no longer sit back and pretend that these far-right mass shooters are simply mentally ill. They aren't mentally ill. They are gullible fools that are being brainwashed and incited into committing atrocities against American people by the former president and his Republican enablers in Congress and on TV that parrot his replacement theory talking points. They all have blood on their hands. So that is just from almost about 3 hours ago. A few minutes shy, about 24 minutes shy of 3 hours. Interesting. It continues to show just who it is committing the crimes. Cocoa for Peace makes this statement, and this is something I definitely agree with. Which is related to the previous statement. Cocoa for Peace says the poison is being dispensed by Fox, Newsmax, The Daily Caller, OANN, The Blaze, and most GOP representatives several times a day, every day, excuse me. Definitely is. They just continue to repeat Trump's lies, and they incite violence in people. Trending in the United States is Arizona. Why is Arizona trending? Okay, this is probably good. It prefaces itself, says, while in 4 minutes, former U.S. Marine marksmanship instructor and Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes dismantles the right's Second Amendment lies. Watch till end. Okay, we got audio up.
Hey everybody, Adrian Fontes here, Democrat running for Arizona Secretary of State, and I was a marksmanship instructor in the Marine Corps. I taught Marines how to shoot. Why is that important? Because I think there's a lot of people who don't understand what the Second Amendment actually means in context of the whole Constitution, right? Right. The confusion is I can just be a militia by myself, and a well-regulated militia just means what I want it to mean. That's not true. It's 100% not true. And I'm going to use this copy of the Constitution that the League of Women Voters gave me to show you why. Here's what the Second Amendment says. It's really easy. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And everybody always says, oh, well, that's great. Well, what does militia mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? Well, guess what? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 and 16. Here's what a militia is. For those of you especially part of the fetishizing gun weapons kind of crowd, here's what it means. Congress shall have the power to call forth the militia, execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. The militia, in the context of our Constitution, is enforcing the laws of the Union. They work for the government, not against some tyrannical fantasy government that you guys are fetishizing against. That's not what it's supposed to. It says so right here. It also says that the Congress shall have the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. That means you get your militia arms from the government. You don't buy them yourself. That's what the Constitution says. Then it goes on to say, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively appointment of officers. So it's a whole unit. There's discipline. They arm it. It's organized under Congress's rules, reserving to the states the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Congress provides the rules for the militia. Congress provides the arms for the militia. Congress calls up the militia. You don't just get to be a militia on your own. And if you look carefully at Heller, you can see that Scalia hedged in his free-for-all opinion. It is not a free-for-all. He hedged. He put just the right hedge in there because he knew that giving everybody a right to have any weapon they want is wrong. And why am I passionate about this? Why do I know about this? Not just because I'm running for Secretary of State and ran an election in Maricopa County, right here in Arizona, but because back when I was in Yuma as an active duty Marine, I was a marksmanship instructor. Digging through some stuff, I found this manual that I used to use, this giant thick manual that Marines use to train each other on how to fire weapons. I mean, look at this thing. This is what we had to teach Marines. It's a 2-week course. Marines have to go through this every single year to be qualified to shoot with the M16A2 service rifle, which is like the AR-15. But an 18-year-old in the United States of America, an 18-year-old doesn't have to go through any of that training, can go grab an AR-15 and do damage like they've done and murder kids in classrooms like they've done, like they continue to do. It's crazy. You know, and when it comes down to it, sure, some of the Democrats have a little blame, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, but what about the Republicans like Ted Cruz that are out there blaming doors? What about all of the Republicans who are not standing up doing what their constituents want them to do in their own red states? The kind of regulation that we're talking about, universal background checks, banning assault weapons. These are all very, very popular, and none of the Republicans are backing any of that stuff. So you can go out there and say, oh, these two Democrats, it's all of the Republicans. They all need to get on board and do what the American public wants them to do. I'm Adrian Fontes. I'm running for Secretary of State in Arizona, and this Democrat is not going to go quietly into the night. We're going to fight, and we're going to win.
So that video came to us from Midas Touch. It's a good video. It is definitely on point. Okay. Why is PTSD trending? Well, one of the reasons is it's this statement. It says, let me get it here. Put it right there. Make it bigger. It is, you can see the big banner, I'm sure, possibly, depending on the side of your screen, but it says on the tweet, without an AR-15 or any gun really, Garcia is just another psychotic neo-Nazi who lives in Texas, and 15 people are still alive and well, and countless others are not getting hit with PTSD right now. It's the guns. This below it, this is the result. Reagan's deinstitutionalization program exploded homelessness and has incarcerated millions of the mentally ill, including lots of veterans suffering from PTSD. And it points to this graphic. That fewer people are in mental hospitals and many more are in prison. And this one, new rule, effective immediately, mass shootings are now to be referred to as Republican-endorsed killings. And with child rights, I hope to have as many rights as a gun someday. She writes, since Trump, the GOP has morphed into fascist extremists. These domestic terrorists have caused maximum PTSD to every citizen in the country, from a violent insurrection to mass daily shootings. They're hoping a fearful population will vote for an authoritarian to fix things. This one writes, good morning. I'd like to remind you all that this is Mental Health Awareness Month. By belittling jokes, the disregard for those with PTSD, and general apathy for other struggles, it seems you don't care and needed a reminder. For those suffering, I stand with you. In response, Dr. Amy writes, chronic PTSD never fully goes away. Sometimes we are better than other times. In the bad times, try to be understanding of the fact that we say we can't. That's what we mean. If we make plans, then break them. It's not because we don't value you. It's that we can't. This person decided to sign off Twitter for the day 2 hours ago because it was too triggering for my PTSD. Have a better evening. Is this what gave corrupt Maricopa County Supervisor PTSD? Here's a compilation of angry Arizonians lashing out at the Board of Supervisors after the midterm debacle. It says Arizona official targeted by election deniers now struggles with PTSD. So that's a I guess trying to make fun of the Democrat who doesn't like what all the Republicans said. So is this a Republican? Oh, he's a senior reporter working for NBC. America, a nation of PTSD survivors, says Glenn. Compliments of the GOP, its guns, and the Republicans. Renee Libby writes, sometimes I think America needs to see the horrible images of gun violence, but people with PTSD would be triggered. Privacy, dignity of victims and families should be respected. The people we think need to see it the most are the same people whose pathologies render them uncaring. True. The ones that should see it wouldn't see it because they would say they don't need to look at it. Bunny writes, I had a guy in my direct messages telling me pretty girls don't get PTSD. What the fuck does that even mean? Indeed, Bunny, everybody can get PTSD if exposed to something that is truly threatening to their dignity and character. So there's a lot of talk about that, but that's with any tweet. There's always multiple interpretations. So some tweets. Any more of them? Latest topics. Always have to go back to 100% in order to see actually the topics. Not very much there. That's your living room. Yep, that's your living room. About 9:37. Right back, ADM FLA Girl 38. Let me know if you want me to call. Nah, I don't need a caller tonight. I don't have it set up for that either. You heard that Trump lost his case against Michael Cohen. Trump loses case against Michael Cohen. Most of these articles on that topic are old. Are you talking about a case that was solved last month? Because all of these articles about the lawsuit to Cohen are from April 12th. So I don't know if you're talking about something that old. Yeah, all these articles coming up are from 3 weeks ago. There is this article that's out there on a different subject, which was mentioned earlier. Sometimes I wish these big, huge, giant advertisements would not come up and eat up all the screen. It's like all they care about is getting you to watch the advertisement. They don't care that, like, if you're trying to show any of this on your show, that it's not going to work for you. These huge, giant advertisements in them. But be that as it may, you just have to deal with the way it looks. And I guess we'll try to show the video of him instead of worrying about, can we make that big?
I bought the team, Kevin. I bought the team. I put it on my Chase Freedom Unlimited card, and I'm a cash back on a few other
It's got
things
a
too.
commercial.
Sound system. Gary from deep.
So just deal with the fact that it has a commercial in it. Maybe they'll keep CNN from trying to give us a copyright strike because they get the commercial in here.
I like it. I'll break it to Clay. Cash back like a pro with Chase Freedom Unlimited. How do you cash back? Chase, make more of what's yours.
Let's turn to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is an area you've been focused on a lot in the last few weeks. As you know, Justice Clarence Thomas accepted years of free luxury trips from a GOP donor. He sold real estate to him, accepted free rent from him for his mother, allowed him to pay for his grandnephew's private school tuition. Much of this not disclosed at all. We also learned from the Washington Post that Justice Thomas's wife accepted tens of thousands of hidden payments from a conservative judicial activist, Leonard Leo, who's been very instrumental in shaping the court. Some of your fellow Democrats on Capitol Hill say that this seems to go beyond ethical lapses. It rises to the level of corrupt behavior. Is that a word you would use, corrupt?
Well, I can tell you that the conclusion most people would reach is that this tangled web around Justice Clarence Thomas just gets worse and worse by the day. I don't know what's going to come up next. I thought I'd heard it all, but more disclosures about his activities just embarrasses me. The question is whether it embarrasses the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice. Chief Justice Roberts has the power in his hands to change this first thing tomorrow morning. He could announce a code of conduct for the court and finally means something. He could announce that the court will be subject to at least the minimal standards that apply to all other federal judges. This is the Roberts Court, and history is going to judge him by the decision he makes on this. He has the power to make the difference.
So you said Justice Thomas's actions call into question his objectivity when it comes to future cases. I understand that this stuff should have been disclosed. I mean, I think it's pretty difficult to argue that it shouldn't have been disclosed. But can you point to any specific action that you think Justice Thomas has taken on the court that you think was influenced by any of this?
Well, of course, you can connect the dots and draw your own conclusions from them. But when you have Leonard Leo's organization sending money to Thomas's family and instructing Kellyanne Conway to make sure you don't disclose the justice's wife's name in the process, though the money's going to her. You have the organization that is sending the money, filing an amicus brief before the court in the Shelby County decision on voting rights. You have a final verdict where Clarence Thomas rules in favor of Leonard Leo's organization and votes 5-4. Connect those dots and say, wait a minute, that stinks. You shouldn't have that sort of thing happening at the highest court in America. It just destroys the integrity of the court.
Well, we've also seen other justices, including Gorsuch and Sotomayor, vote in a way that was good for the publishing company that had paid them millions of dollars for their autobiographies. So I think this is something that goes beyond Justice Thomas, right? I mean, this should be something all of the justices recuse if they have a reason to do so, and all of the justices disclose everything. I don't sense any momentum on the court from any of the justices for that, though. Not just Thomas.
Well, I keep calling on Chief Justice Roberts to make a move and say something and solve this problem, and he has the power to do it for the Roberts Court. But other justices can speak out as well. And I will tell you, I am blind to the political philosophy or judicial philosophy of the judge. They should all be living by the standards that the rest of government lives by in terms of disclosure and avoiding conflicts of interest.
So because of the separation of powers, I believe, you're not willing to subpoena the Chief Justice, John Roberts. You've indicated that it's unlikely you're going to be able to pass any legislation that would impose an ethics code on the court. And you've said you don't think the Justice Department should investigate Justice Thomas's actions. So in essence, aren't you kind of throwing up your hands and saying the Supreme Court isn't really accountable to anybody but themselves? There's nothing you can do, even though you're the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee?
Not at all, Jake. Let me just tell you the bottom line is this. Everything is on the table. Day after day, week after week, more and more disclosures about Justice Thomas. We cannot ignore them. The thing we're going to do first, obviously, is to gather the evidence, the information that we need to draw our conclusions. I'm not ruling out anything, and I might say that the Judicial Conference, which has received some information from the Chief Justice, is undergoing its own investigation, as I understand. So there are active efforts underway, as there should be. We need to change the image of this court. At this point, it's at the lowest ebb in history.
Are you willing to subpoena Leonard Leo or Harlan Crow? Obviously, you're not going to subpoena Supreme Court justices.
Everything is on the table.
Okay, so as he said, everything is on the table. So you saw that from CNN State of the Union. Definitely, he's trying to hold Justice Clarence Thomas accountable in whatever way that he can. So we'll see how that works out. We have some new suggestions from our producer. First of all, we have something about Marjorie Taylor Greene. So here we go with the first of these. This one comes to us from Hal Sparks. So Politics Video Channel says, breaking, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is thinking about leaving Congress. Hal Sparks writes, yeah, there's a lot of actual work being a right-wing podcasting moron, plus you can fuck up all the gym rats and internet hosts you can find. So this thread is here. Let's see what the original thread is about. She said, becoming a member of Congress has made my life miserable. I made a lot more money before I got here. I lost money since I've gotten here. I have people come up to me and say crazy things to me out of the blue in public places. So those are the little quotes, but there's probably a lot more in the article. And of course, there's advertising. So let's see where we can get around it. She revealed she hates her job as a lawmaker in one of her recent episodes of her podcast. She said, the nature of this job, it keeps members of Congress and senators in Washington so much of the time, too much time to be honest with you, that we don't get to go home and spend more time with our families, our friends, all in our district, or maybe just be regular people, because this job is so demanding and it's turned into practically year round. And for those of us in the House of Representatives, we have to run for Congress every 2 years. So you're practically campaigning nearly the entire time that you're here serving as a representative. So that's just a couple of examples that I can give you that I believe is a recipe for a disaster. And that's how people just fall into this social club. I would call it a social club here in Washington, D.C. Now, for me, I have no interest in that. I really don't. And I'll tell you why. Becoming a member of Congress made my life miserable. This is all the stuff we said before. She made a lot more money before she got here. She claims she's lost money. Claims people come up here and say crazy things. And she continues. So it's not like I think it is like something that I enjoy, because I really don't enjoy it. So I guess that's the whole article. Yep. She doesn't enjoy her job. And yet she ran for re-election. This one is entitled Trying to Pick Trump's Brain. A neuroscientist explains why Donald Trump's narcissism is now a major threat, says Marcia Howes. This is a Raw Story article. On March 18th, former President Donald Trump said he believes that he will likely be arrested on charges relating to hush money paid to a porn star. Where did that go? Did we look? Did we? No. It just jumped when they jumped in more ads. He was already calling on his supporters to protest his arrest. And while that's not exactly surprising, it's something we should be deeply concerned about. He embodies the qualities of a textbook narcissist. When narcissists feel threatened, they frequently experience what is called narcissistic rage and become aggressive and obsessed with revenge. Given the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol, which Trump helped incite, we should be vigilant to ensure that history does not repeat itself. It's no secret that Trump has a narcissistic personality. I doubt the man himself would deny this narcissism if he were speaking honestly and in private. In a Vanity Fair article published before he became president, developmental psychologist Howard Gardner of Harvard University called Trump remarkably narcissistic, and clinical pathologist Ben Mackles called Trump a classic case of textbook narcissistic personality disorder. The article cites more than a few mental health professionals who believe Trump fits all the criteria for having pathological narcissism, and over the years, many similar articles would follow, such as a 2016 article in The Atlantic by Northwestern psychology professor Dan McAdams, and a New York Times article by Jennifer Senior titled, "We Are All at the Mercy of the Narcissist in Chief." Even some Republicans, advertising getting in the way, have come out and attested to Trump's narcissism. For example, a CNN article claims that Paul Ryan was convinced that Donald Trump has narcissistic personality disorder. And Ty Cobb, a lawyer who was a member of his administration legal team, described the ex-president as a deeply wounded narcissist. We are all familiar with narcissism, a term derived from Greek mythological figure Narcissus, who fell in love with himself after he saw his own image as reflected in the pool of water. Most of us have known a narcissist at some point in our lives, but what characteristics does a narcissist have exactly? Dan McAdams writes, people with strong narcissistic needs want to love themselves, and they desperately want others to love them too, or at least admire them, see them as brilliant and powerful and beautiful, even just see them, period. The fundamental life goal is to promote the greatness of the self for all to see. When Trump was president, his narcissism was constantly on display for the whole world to see. He bragged about his crowd sizes. He called himself a genius. He has since embraced the idea that he's second only to Jesus Christ. It should, however, be emphasized that Trump is likely a special kind of narcissist, one psychologist called a vulnerable narcissist, a person who tells himself he is superior, but deep down is extremely insecure. These narcissists have low self-esteem and crave affirmation. While this insight explains a lot about Trump's character and previous behavior, it is relevant to the present movement because narcissists who experience a fall from grace experience narcissistic injury, which can lead to them lashing out and trying to inflict damage on those they feel did them wrong. Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders define narcissistic injury as vulnerability and self-esteem, in which makes narcissistic people very sensitive to injury from criticism or defeat. The manual goes on to say, although they may not show it outwardly, criticism may haunt these individuals and leave them feeling humiliated, degraded, hollow, and empty. The injury can promote rage, which manifests itself as intense anger, outbursts, and expressive aggressiveness. If he's arrested, it will most surely send him into an episode of rage. We should be concerned about this possibility because the last time there was an event that could have triggered narcissistic rage, when he lost the presidency, he refused to concede the election, fought to retain power, and directed supporters to march in the Capitol building, which they later attacked. Many politicians were put in jeopardy, including his own Vice President, Mike Pence. We're all familiar with all the destruction caused that day, but the damage could conceivably be a lot worse if his loyalists with the proclivity of violence, believe their political messiah is facing incarceration. But that's not all we have to worry about. He's running for president again. And his only semi-senior serious GOP challenger is Nikki Haley, his former ambassador to the United Nations. As wild as it sounds, Trump is still about as popular as ever. If he's elected a second time, it's a terrifying thought, but if he loses, the result could be just as dangerous. A second loss would almost certainly end his presidential ambitions. The demise of his political career could prompt the world's most notable narcissist to become further unhinged. And January 6, 2021 could be superseded in history books by an even darker date. Homegrown terrorism isn't even implausible. A couple of years ago, the idea of Americans storming the Capitol sounded absolutely bonkers. Hardly anyone would take it seriously, except for those familiar with his personality and his vulnerability. The article writer says, as a neuroscientist and a psychology researcher, I saw the potential for such a thing long before he got elected into office, and wrote an article for Ross Doherty titled Trump has a mental disorder that makes him as dangerous as a world leader. And then in 2008, the article writer said that he wrote another opinion piece called Trump's Destruction, a neuroscientist explains what happens when a narcissist begins to lose power. But that prediction wouldn't come true until about 2 years later. The article writer says, I believe it's likely that history will repeat itself, but he hopes that he isn't right, or she hopes that she isn't right. The article writer says we must be vigilant. It's unclear how to prevent such a thing. But if we don't, we can expect Murphy's Law to remain true that what can go wrong will go wrong. And the article writer says, let's do what we can to make sure America gets it right this time. So the article writer is Bobby Erazian, a cognitive neuroscientist and author of the book Romance of Reality, How Universe Organizes Itself to Create Live Consciousness and Cosmic Complexity. He's also a blogger for Psychology Today and creator of the Substack Road to Omega. And you can follow him on Twitter at Bobby Azarian, or on Facebook, or on these other Flipboard, whatever that is. Not even sure what that is. Yep, we all know it's a very dangerous future, one way or the other, whether Trump gets in or he doesn't, because he will incite those who believe in him implicitly. Okay. This is a different video from State of the Union, I believe. So this is Hausbach says, you should have broomed the old bat when you had the chance. Jake Tepper to Durham, all due respect, sir, you and your fellow Democrats were very ginger and very polite when it came to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and not pushing her to retire when you had a Democrat majority in the Senate. how'd that work out for you and how'd that work out for Roe versus Wade? He says in the thread, it's just the thread is just him writing about his article. So Aaron Rupert posted this video, and let's play the video. The levels are good.
We need her. It is a challenge in the Senate Judiciary Committee to do our business. For example, you raised the question of a subpoena, and I haven't reached any conclusion on that. But if we go down that path, we need a majority on the committee. Right now, with her absence, it's a 10-10 committee, and the majority is not there. And a proxy vote doesn't count in this circumstance. So it's a complicated situation. I hope she does what's best for her and her family and the state of California and makes a decision soon as to whether she's coming back.
I mean, all due respect, sir, you and your fellow Democrats were very ginger and very polite when it came to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and not pushing her to retire when you had a Democratic majority in the Senate. How'd that work out for you? How'd that work out for Roe v. Wade?
Well, I can tell you that you can play these out and try to guess what the Supreme Court opinions resulting from it will be. The bottom line is, though, we have in the past had members of the Senate, I can think of a handful as I'm sitting here, Democrats and Republicans, who've been absent because of medical conditions for lengthy periods of time. I want to treat Dianne Feinstein fairly. I want to be sensitive to her family situation and her personal situation. And I don't want to say that she's going to be put under more pressure than others have been in the past. But the bottom line is the business of the committee and of the Senate is affected by her absence.
President Biden's going to meet.
That was just a short clip. So they were talking about Dianne Feinstein and needing her to get things done. And our final segment of the night. Our final segment of the night is the animal segment. So the animal segment. I don't know why it's opening that. Should be able to possibly show that. But our final segment is from our producer. These are the newest little babies in the household. Newest little cat babies. So hopefully you can see that on your screens. I think maybe, can I make it bigger, smaller? Yep, that makes it bigger. Newest little cat babies. Hey, Trucker John, you got here right at the end of the show. So, folks, I am going to say hello to Erin West, who snuck in here earlier when I did see her name, but didn't get to say hello. And I'm going to say that this is plenty of show for me, but please, we're going to throw out a promo for Trucker John. You'll find Trucker John on typically Tuesdays and Thursdays. And various times whenever he feels like coming on. But follow Trucker John on YouTube. Okay? He tries to broadcast when Hal Sparks is not doing a morning show. So if you know what time Hal Sparks is on with the morning show, that's noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Central. kind of look for Trucker John around that time. It really does vary, but yeah, check out his channel. We will occasionally, or his moderator will throw on a invite for you on the Freedom Speech and You Discord. That's for our longtime members. The rest of you just have to go find Trucker John on YouTube. Look for his profile photo, because there's more than one person named Trucker John, but there's only one Trucker John that is our familiar, our friend. So find him out there. Listen, I've been doing this for just about 3 hours. I'm ready to go. I will see you again next week at this time. This week I had family FaceTime, so I had to start at 7:15. I will try to come on at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, if I can for you. But we will be back next week on the 14th of May. And we will have more topics and more things to do. So please like and subscribe and spread the show around. And thanks very much to you longtime viewers. And thanks very much to our moderators. Thanks to our producer who threw us some new segments and is always patient with me and always gives me free reign to pick most of the topics for the show. Y'all have a great evening. If it's earlier where you are, have a great afternoon. And if you are in the overnight watching this later, have a great whatever. Thank you so much for joining us for Freedom Speech and You, and we'll see you here again soon. Bye now.